Okay, here we go. Excellent connection. Excellent.
Yeah, it's working. That's
Oh,
nice.
Ricardo, suddenly the frame rate is way better because now we have good connection.
Yeah, so, okay. Um, yeah, then, I mean, if you want to try, maybe it was from 2,500
Of
to
1,000,
1,500,
yeah.
maybe 2,000. And if you want to save time, just leave it right now.
I think it's actually good because also I see the live stream on YouTube and it actually quite.
Okay, so it works.
Yeah.
And you're safe.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, it
next
works.
problem. For you, it works?
Yes.
Great.
Is this you?
No, it's a friend of mine.
Because wow, you were 10.
No, it's not me.
How did that happen the last weeks to get B10?
Well, you know, there are of those bleaching, so.
Yeah, that's true. I want to try one thing. Just add this. And I'm just going to test this to make sure it works.
Also with sound? No?
No sound. Oh. Okay. Yay.
Oh, how loud do you want the sound?
I want it pretty loud.
Should we
Yeah.
try it to see what?
No, but you just do it like this.
Okay.
If it's too so, and then we will raise the volume.
And you want me still to flip through the?
Yes, please.
Yes.
And can I just show you?
Wait, I
can show you during lunch because I'm after lunch.
Sure, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
How was the cycling?
I've been driving the whole time. I'm like a chauffeur right
With what?
You have a car.
With Saskia's van.
Oh, that's good, I guess.
But I like
You can
it's
drive.
okay.
I'm
Yeah.
joking.
What do you
Like, sorry. No, like, I was not sure how early it is to make a bad joke like that.
It's too early.
It wasn't gendered. It was not gendered at all. It was just
What was it?
you. No,
That's
a
even
Dutch
worse.
thing. Because, like, a lot of Dutch people don't have a license, actually.
True. Yeah, it's not necessary.
And Australia was a long time before cars, so
Before car.
before you would be able to drive a car, right?
True.
So actually, it was just a logic conclusion.
Well, there was a lot happening in that millisecond.
What? What do you mean?
Yes.
Do you have a better connector now?
For someone else?
No, because
But I don't need to connect anything.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not using my laptop.
Okay.
Yeah. I just need to talk about the live stream.
Because you want to live stream it on.
No, I decided against it. But now, like, just to figure out where to put this.
So what do you want to do?
So I have like small islands, and then I'm not sure. Can I move it?
Yeah. Maybe it's somehow fixed, but now you can move it around a little bit.
Want ik heb zeg maar kleine eilanden. En dan zou het wel goed zijn om misschien dichterbij.
Ja, het vervelende is, dit is de camera voor de livestream. En helaas, zijn accu is niet goed, dus hij moet altijd met stroom verbonden zijn.
Hoe lang kan die?
Nou ja, we kunnen een verlengsnoer maken. Maar dit is één. Dit moet natuurlijk altijd met de computer verbonden zijn. Dus je hebt, zeg maar, dit ding, wat je moet bewegen. Deze kabel is vrij lang. En nou ja, hier kan je natuurlijk een verlengsnoer aan maken. Dus theoretisch kan je, zeg maar, als dit hier blijft staan, kan je denk ik zo'n radius van daar.
Ja.
Nou ja, we kunnen, zeg maar, als je daar wat wil doen, dan staan. Ik denk dat het zoiets zal zijn, dat eiland, deze eiland. En dat is zo.
Dat als eiland.
Ja. Kijk, theoretisch
Or maybe when are you? What time?
4.
At 4. Maybe let's not do it now because it could be that it suddenly stops to work and we need it especially now in the morning. So Matthias, the technician, comes at 10 and changes the part of hardware.
Ik noem maar wat. Oh nee,
Yeah.
dat ga je niet zien.
I'm also happy to just have coffee first. Okay.
Do that. But I just thought it's maybe safer to do it afterward. It will work, so don't worry. Everything will be fine. But we
Okay.
can
Dit is
if
een
we have the
beetje-
lunch break where we can try it out.
Right. Okay.
Ik weet niet waar jij bent eigenlijk.
How are we doing
maar-
today with more,
Hmm?
with things with me helping out? Is it more complex ones? Or?
What you have to tell me what you
Oh, that's
want to
okay.
do and what you agree to check. That's the only thing. So
Okay.
if you feel comfortable
Yeah.
doing
Of ja,
the ones you already checked and you know they're complex,
Yeah.
I'm happy if you do
En,
it.
yeah.
And also I'm happy if you
oké, dan gaan we dat proberen.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean,
nu
Jack-
zit het,
Jack-
nu is het
and
het is
To
een
be
beetje
transparent,
gedoetje
like
hier,
being paid
maar de
like
nee,
100
die
is 100 a
computer
day,
niet.
Okay.
but for the hours that
I know.
Ja,
Okay.
ja,
it's
ja,
like
die
under
computer
minimum
wel,
wage.
sorry.
I'm
Het
totally
is
not
dus
aware
die
of
computer, maar die zit ook met de kabel vast.
Okay, totally fair enough.
Nee,
Ja.
dat zetten we neer.
So
Ja, dat
just
kan.
you can just tell how much you want to work because for
Okay.
euros is
Je bent niet na een pauze. Hè?
Yeah.
exactly it's an hour.
Yeah,
Voor
yeah.
de lunch. Oké, dan moeten we,
Okay.
I mean, it's not an
dan
hour,
moeten we
but
het
like,
straks zien te plannen.
Have you seen the
Ja.
schedule for
Ik moet
today?
ook best wel veel opzetten. Dus,
Dus dan,
I don't-
Just tell me which
en
one you
eigenlijk ben
think.
jij een
Has
beetje
is
afhankelijk
they don't
van
need
hoe ver
anything
wij
second
naar
half.
kunnen komen.
Hassan is fine. Like Asker. Simone, maybe if you can do, because she also talked with you about the slides,
Yeah,
right?
het
yeah.
hoeft niet super.
Uh,
Het is in
Sorry,
ieder
I
geval
remember
gewoon
Dana, we can
dicht
do
erbij,
because
zodat
we already
mensen
talked
er ook
with
omheen
her.
lopen, zodat
I'll
er
speak to
niet
Jack and
wordt.
figure out a different
Want mensen
agreement.
lopen rond en hebben dan
I
chat.
Yeah.
feel like we didn't agree on
En
hours.
het
I'm
zou
like at all.
zonde zijn
Like,
als
we
je
just
de
told
mensen
to do
voor
I told
veel
her
zijn,
many
zodat er
times,
niks
like,
meer werkt.
I don't do anything
Gewoon iets
I didn't
verbinden.
agree to anymore.
Yeah.
En je wil het in een cirkel of in een blauwe bol? Of in een,
Wat?
Like working
De-
conditions
jouw
have to
werk.
be
Dat zijn dus
transparent
eilanden.
ja,
and,
en
like, I'm not gonna do this
want kijk,
so much, but
het makkelijkst
Yeah.
so
is dat
please.
Yeah. I don't normally. I just because it was DAI, I just thought it's fine.
You know, like this, it's really. I think especially like let's say the old Manchester mentality is way less
Yeah.
people that just do it yourself and that do it yourself and the thing is what I criticize the most about is that they exploit themselves. Like Jack
Yeah.
works way more than it's possible.
Yeah. And normalizes it.
Exactly, and I don't support that, so I don't even feed this structure. So things I say it's not part of my content. I don't do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my problem is what I also said, if they want to work with active students, I need to have transparency what the agreement was.
Mm.
And I don't feel comfortable telling anyone to do something if I have no idea what was the, what
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's in the future. I cannot talk.
Yeah. I'll speak to them. Yeah, that would be good.
For the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
So okay, what do you think then? So Simone research. Dorothy is online. We can do. Marcos, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Constantine. Maybe he, because.
Playing a video.
Oh, okay. Was there anything complicated? No.
No.
Okay, we can do Anna or don't need as much. Secondary, we can do these outside sales.
Okay.
So today, take it easy.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
it's not even.
I'm also feeling a bit like coldy, like from, you know. Yeah.
No, take it easy. Take
Yeah.
even if you don't want, like, if you want to go and lay down in Simone, you can also do Simone, you know.
I can do some minutes. Yeah.
If only if you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't think it's a big deal to flip those slides.
Yeah. She has like weird. Well, they have like weird.
Or you know, like what they also
Tuesday.
can do or should do is asking someone of the other colleagues, peers, suppose.
Oh, if they want to help out.
Sure, like I mean that's usually what the best way to arrange your kind of production of what you want to do is by having like Saskia yesterday had, you know, like 6 people helping and you have to, it's part of
You mean, you mean the second years to do that?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like actually us or you, we're not there to produce the
Sure.
entire
It's fine.
piece, but
I don't mind.
no, sure,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
so if you want to do Simona, yes. And
Yeah.
then the
Okay.
rest,
Cool.
just let me-
Thanks. Yeah.
Tomorrow you have to say again, maybe also just look for the list if there
Okay.
1, 2, 3 in it. You think, oh yeah, I already did the rehearsal with them.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Thanks.
Okay. Right, so like it's like he would just they do the presentation of Simone because Nuno was switching through.
Let's go a second. You have the video here already here.
Yeah.
We will do the same setup within,
Yeah, just there.
So then we will need a long.
We can actually put it up already because the first one don't need anything to get the phone.
And the whiskey.
Good morning, everyone.
Ja. Ja, ik kon zien aan je jas dat je er even Ja.
Did you bike both like together on like a tandem bike?
On the top, of course. With the DAI logo and the flag.
Yeah, this is
Yes. Yes.
for other people, huh?
For us,
Okay. What to do? Oh yeah.
You remember me?
Did you study with me?
You were that 2016, right?
Hey, Julia.
You remember me too, Ricardo.
Yeah, more or less. There was
Is this what's good?
Yeah, that would be so good.
Wait, you need. Yes, you can.
loading. It might be the cable.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. The cable. Why? What happened? But we changed the cables. The couple.
No, I changed to the long one now, and it's still red. Then we don't have an image. So then, but with the short, yeah, then it's, you can reach.
What? I mean, Özgür's computer gets there. Wait, this computer.
No, check if it will work now first.
Who can I ask to open a window upstairs?
I
Because
cannot ask down.
Beneden, yeah?
Yeah.
Gewoon
Ask the lady?
yeah.
The lady, because I really think we should.
Karen, yeah.
But they also, yeah. Volgens mij hebben ze ook een
Certificatie, ja, maar als je dat krantenartikelen leest.
ja.
No, they can open not a lot, but they can open the windows. Yeah.
Because now it's, oh no, come on.
Yes. So was the cable? Which one was it?
So this is his short cable, and this is his long cable. So the short cable, so I think it's not really the cable, but it's,
I think it's the machine.
no, yeah.
The contacts, because
Well, it's HDMI with a lot of, HDMI has something like 15,
Can we set up my thing?
yeah, like if you tell us exactly what we can do, then yes. So just sound, only sound,
No, and one of the screens.
and one of the screens.
Yeah.
Because that's we have to do next.
that
to it.
turn one off.
Yes, just as well.
Left or right? No, only,
I know there's only one. I think
only left you can turn off.
that the right one will be.
Hello. Slept well?
What?
Slept well?
Say it again?
Slept
well,
well?
yes. But no breakfast.
Oh, you
I
did
got
have
up
breakfast.
too late, maybe.
I had some mushrooms, eggs, cinnamon roll,
Wow.
kiwi smoothie. Sorry.
Get up!
I got some
Oh my
turkey.
god, her face! I don't see your face basically, but
I see your eyes.
I could lie, like het beschuit met hagelslag. Blah.
Now, cinnamon rolls, I don't care, but kiwi smoothie.
30 minutes extra sleep.
Because you're closer than us?
No, you're not.
No,
No, you have 30 minutes extra sleep.
Ah,
I know today I had 30 minutes extra because I wake up
Okay.
late.
Okay, I need
I also woke up later today. I snoozed until I couldn't.
No, you know, I
And the other
most of
one,
the time I
very
woke up when it starts becoming light, but I know that when I'm tired, that system goes a little bit down.
Uh-huh.
So I was awake at something like 5 o'clock, and I thought, oh, still an hour or so. And then I woke up and I thought, now I'm too late. And it was 5 to 7.
Wow. So you don't put an alarm?
Most of the time, not, but now I will.
Yeah.
Ah, Julia.
Ricardo, can you get me the back in the...
Downstairs told me about the smoking. That people go out really to smoke, but they have this absorb and a lot of tourists come in and they don't hold it. And so also kids
Yeah, yeah.
I think that they should do that.
Okay.
Yeah, if there is some announcement, general announcement. What are you looking here in this bag? But what do you need?
Like to connect the...
Is this one?
Yes.
That's this one. This one. It's this one.
Is it? No, where?
You? Oh no.
No, it's not.
Oh, then it's display board.
It's different one, yes. But this one. Right? Not this one, it's...
No. I don't know. It is. Is it?
What does it...
But it's the question is, yeah. But
here we go, yeah. Otherwise we could just connect it straight to the screen.
yeah, but if you have to, no, you cannot connect. Then it will be straight to the left screen.
Yeah, then we connect it straight to the left screen. That's what
And who is going to control it?
they just have to play it. And they have to play it also here. It's just one image or file.
It's weird because it's really an.
Yeah, like let's just leave it because it's a repetitive issue. I have like no patience for this anymore. Like, he has to change this, Matthias. It's something of his.
How to talk to the.
Yeah.
Oh, I will try and then talk more with Rafael if he needs more.
Or I would just do it in the
Okay.
So
You will play a sound file from
Yeah.
here. Okay. Then you don't need image.
Well, I needed an image, a PDF to be projected there, and I need a sound to be playing.
Okay.
That's what I need.
But can you have like on one computer the PDF
Yeah.
and on one like
The
Of
sound.
course, I just don't have another computer to do the other thing.
Anyone?
But I need a third computer with Zach.
So we need anyone having a computer to borrow?
Fine.
It's not that big. But I don't have a USB file. No, I do have a USB.
This is annoying. This would be so easy if things just would work.
Yeah, but that's why we're born, huh? Because
No.
things don't work.
Yesterday was your rating.
I'm sorry.
You are
I'm sorry.
changing your philosophy.
Where's my phone? Where's the check? Huh? No, like hardware is not working. And it's not our fault.
Which hardware?
It's we don't know. It's probably one of
Okay, so we'll move the sound file
it's
to
like
this one,
small switch
and
basically
this one will play
the sound to the screen.
the sound, and then you will find a computer,
Changing
and this one will play the video.
computers or
It's just an image, just a PDF.
Okay,
With a text.
okay, so then you will
cause it
connect
to
this
stop.
to the net
And I think
computer.
that's something hard.
Actually, the connection to the screen doesn't work at the
And
moment.
because we had it a couple of times, and it suddenly works again, then it doesn't
And
work
then,
again.
so we connect this computer
Like
to the net
it's getting
screen,
tiring of trying out
to the
any of that, and just stays on that.
Yeah.
It's not.
That's
you don't need to scroll through it.
You know,
It's like
like
a reoccurrence.
Yeah, just like SVX, it's just a text.
And this
It's this.
sound file will loop. Or
No, it's this.
No, this is the file that's gonna play for the presentation. The one on loop is already playing.
okay, so you will
Just
say
tried
start.
everything. He was here. He
Yes.
also tried. Okay.
Will you be the one who will
I
start
can
it?
do it.
Okay, I'll let you know exactly when, because I'll be reading the text, and then when I say a word,
Or you already told to Lulu or somebody else.
because Lulu's not on shift. They said they're not doing it now.
Do we have a free? Because this is here.
But no.
Oh yeah, you need to use the mouse. Just put it on the desktop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Is it already on there?
No.
No. I just wanna hear.
Is it playing already or?
Here it.
Or can't you open it with VLC or
Of
something?
course. Or whatever.
This plays from the Bluetooth speaker now with the background.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's there. Oh, it's already. Just to know if it's playing. I think it is playing, right? It is.
Yeah.
Okay. Then this is set.
And now we
We're
need an
gonna
image,
plug it in
right?
there.
Sag mal, weißt du, ob das Wireless-Mikrofon, ob das bis da oben rein hinreicht? Ich kann das probieren. Wir haben. Ich nehme an. Ja, und auch dann zum Runterlaufen unter den Platten aus. Also, du disconnected zum Sound während dem Runtergehen hast. Das wäre mal die Frage, ja, ob das machen. Wir können es probieren es einfach. Ja, okay. Und dann kommt es später noch rein. Ja. Wir haben auch einen großen Speaker, der jetzt alles Bluetooth Wireless Speaker, und da gibt es auch einen Adapter mit Mikrofon, das ist eine Art Karaoke-Maschine. Aber ich nehme an, dass du direkt am großen Soundsystem hängen willst. Ich denke jetzt mal, auch das Datenverbindung vielleicht ein bisschen stärker. Mit dem großen System meinst du? Ja. Ja, weil ich meine, wenn es nicht von. Du meinst, dass ich den dass du dann mitnehmen? Genau. Das wäre ja die Idee. Ah ja. Ah, okay. Ja, dann nein, aber ich bin sehr zuversichtlich, dass es funktioniert. Wir probieren es einfach und dann können wir noch immer schauen, welchen. Ja. Wann willst du das probieren? Pause? Ja, ich bin in der Pause oder Mittag. Ja, ich meine Mittagspause. Ja. Ja. Wenn keiner der Mittagspause von heute etwas braucht, können wir das probieren. Sonst machen wir es heute kurz nach Ende. Ganz zum Schluss, wenn alles fertig ist. Also wenn das Dinner ist. Dann komm einfach, erinnere mich. Danke. Hast du von welcher Source spielst du das Audio? Computer? Von welcher Source, Input Source spielst du Audio-Track? Computer. Ich habe einmal einen Voice Processor, der über TRX hier reingehen soll. Das hast du schon probiert, ne? Ja, das habe ich schon probiert. Aber Lulu hat noch beim Sound, beim Mixen dabei? Ja, das hast du selbst eine Einstellung gemacht? Oder? Nee, Lulu, aber Lulu meint so, ja, wenn du was willst, dann musst du es mir sagen. Okay. Ich habe jetzt nicht. Nein, aber vielleicht für heute, dass wir nicht komplett die Einstellung machen, man kann Lulu nach Hause, aber ich werde Lulu nur noch fragen, wenn man eher komplizierteres Setup hat, dann kann er hat das mit dir schon gemacht. Also für Donnerstag ist er dann dabei. Ja. Aber heute Abend probieren wir es einfach. Ja. Geht vor allem ob die Verbindung und so. Ja. Ja. Aber das ist auch so, wir haben nur ein TRS oder XLR-Kabel, das geht so praktisch bis in die Mitte. Längeres haben wir nicht. Ich muss schauen, wir könnten ein längeres kriegen, das bis zumindest auf die andere Seite geht. Wie lange muss es sein? Ja, sag mal, wie lange das ist. Nee, ganz zu Beginn meinte er eben mal, dass sie sich auch vorstellen können, dass ich so einen großen Fenster mache. Dann halt alle Tische weg. Ich frage, weil der Techniker kommt her und es kann sein, dass er noch so ein langes XLR-Kabel hat. Also das wäre ein XLR, das wären auch zwei TRS. Zwei TRS, was sind diese Gitarrenklingen? Ah ja, okay. Zwei TRS und ein XLR für das Mikrofon bis zum Fenster. Das Mikrofon muss im Prinzip nicht so lang sein, weil der Voice Processor, das Mikrofon geht da rein. Und dann von da gehen die TRS im Prinzip raus und zum Verstärken. Wie hast du es jetzt ausprobiert? Mit dem kurzen hast du selbst Kabel mitgenommen? Ich habe mein eigenes Kabel gemacht. Ja, und wie lange ist das? Das ist 3 Minuten. Das wäre zu kurz. Das ist halt relativ kurz. Ja. Aber ich meine, es geht schon auch. Es ist einfach, wenn es jetzt doch noch ein längeres liegt, dann kann ich mir einen anderen Radius irgendwie aus. Ja, ich kann fragen, also du brauchst ein langes TRS-Kabel. Zwei. 2 wäre am besten, 1 geht auch. Ja. Und das geht bei dir in den Mixer. Kommt vom Voice Processor hier hin. Vom Voice Processor, ja, okay, ja. Und vom Mikrofon zum Voice Processor nur das Mixer rein. Ja, und das dann einfach noch Strom. Okay, Strom haben wir mittlerweile so. Ah ja. Wir haben. Gut, okay. Danke dir. Also heute dann probieren wir heute nur den Wireless-Check. Das andere müssen wir erst mal mit den Kabeln abnehmen. Das weiß ich auch heute Abend. Vielleicht, weil der Auftrag okay. Ja, dann
Welcome to the few of you who made it on time. Thank you for coming. And yeah,
Ricardo?
second day of our podcast.
So,
Review
are we
together.
reading the text?
And
Oh yeah, when to start the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
the first
when I say
presentation today, I'd say we leave the communication to later.
After how long?
Here.
About
1 second, there's a second.
The first presenters today are Zachary Schoener and Raphael Zeiger with multiplicity of resonant disruption, active envelopment. The question is, hello Netherlands, can you hear us? Multiplicity of resonant disruption is a sound installation of two acts, considering the insurrectory forces of sounds, voices, and reverberating forms of communication of transit for individuals across the world. Through Radio Public, though Radio Public served the Dutch government in the management and continued colonization of Indonesia, the politics of its construction and utilization implicates the larger European colonial project of the East Indies dating from the 16th century. The moment European powers entering the East Indies, Indonesia and the Philippines were split via the borders and relations of the Spanish, Portuguese, and later US and Dutch foreign powers. Prior to Radio Public, the Dutch government relied on English radio transmitters to reach Indonesia. But during World War I, the English began to censor the signals sent, providing for the necessary of the Dutch and the US to claim their rules sonically over their territories. The Dutch completed Radio Public in 1923, and the US followed in suit, establishing the radio transmitter in 1924 in Manila. The race to dominate through radio waves further silenced and erased the relations between the two spaces. The exportation of commodities came in tandem with the implication of foreign wars, aggressions, and competition. The relationship between the Philippines and Indonesia is recorded much further back, well before the 9th century. And the two archipelagos share commonalities in language as well as myths and legends that speak to the shared ancestry between them. In Act 2, Development, recordings of Philippine transactivist, artist, and filmmaker Ram Matero become sonic agents that disrupt and problematize the colonial narrativity and modern racist grammar held in the material relics of European global expansion and domination. Through sharing particular pre-colonial methodologies of the Philippines that register a history of alternative forms of spirituality and storytelling, marginalized connectivity, and living in spite of, Ram Botero's voice and thoughts illuminate a world that could be otherwise.
Just not yeah, and then wait a minute because it's maybe you erased it and then it takes some time. Can you check on YouTube? It's, can you check on YouTube? Yeah, it's there. It's me.
The audio one, the caged bird sings. Dr. Maya Angelou writes, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. So let me begin by telling the story of According to fragments of myths that have survived, the creation was conceived by the goddess Ichabod. One day, she saw the consort Apollo, the great creator who is both man and woman simultaneously, wandering lonely around the cosmos. To amuse them, Ichabod gave Apollo clay from which they fashioned a ball between the earth, and from it they created rivers, oceans, mountains, and forests. Pleased by the consort's creation, Ichabod handed the ball to the sky so they could both marvel at its grandeur. Ichabod was an important deity to the goddess, the goddess of agriculture. She was worshipped as the great provider. She was also the mother goddess who kept children from harm and healed them when they were sick. And most importantly, she was a transgender goddess. Long ago, at the summit of Mount Majas in Panama, the god of death, Siddhartha, was captivated by the dance of the seven moons and fell in love with them. Realizing that other gods are similarly exalted, he commanded the birds and mermaids to sing songs to the moons. He made the flowers bloom so they sweet perfumes reach to the heavens. He then asked the fireflies to light their way to his mountain.
Preferences. Sound
The boy moon, the youngest of the moons, came down. Siddhartha showered him with gifts of gold and many treasures. One night, the great dragon of Unava, who was also captivated by the moons, rose from the sea to devour them. When Siddhartha saw the attack, he flew to the heavens, snatched Bulan, and brought him back to Mount Majas. It is believed that until this day, they still live on top of the mountain as lovers. In Hindu mythology, the sudden death of King Sagar of the Solar dynasty was heavily grieved by his two wives. When the monsoon came, as the clouds gathered, the two women met in the palace garden, and, perhaps brought by the scent of the sandy breeze, they became so consumed with each other that they made love. From that union, Prince Bhagirath was born. But according to Hindu beliefs, the hard parts of humans, the bones, including the teeth, come from the man, and the soft parts, the flesh and the organs, come from the woman. And since the prince came from both women, he did not have the hard parts. So the prince grew up crawling from one place to the next as a lump of flesh. One day, he came upon an old sage who was crippled. The sage was outraged. He thought Bhagirath was mocking his disability. In a loud, angry voice, the sage told Bhagirath, "I am going to curse you for your insolence." Bhagirath implored to him and swore that he was born without bones. So the sage said, "This is how my curse is going to work. If you are lying and you really have bones, you will lose them. But if you are telling me the truth, you will grow them." And that's how Prince Bhagirath got his bones. Prince Bhagirath is an important personality in Hindu mythology. He made sacrifices to convince the goddess Ganga to come down from the heavens and bless the earth as the holiest river of India, the Ganges.
Nama Before we carelessly dismiss such stories as product of human fancy, the Filipino anthropologist F. Landa Hocano suggests that myths fulfill one of the most important functions in society. They serve as a means through which people can logically present fundamental concepts of life and systematically express the sentiments to which they attach those concepts. This reading on mythology is proposed by Jung as archetypes, or the model figure roles incarnated as characters in myths. These archetypes are part of our collective consciousness that inform us the moment we are born into this world of meaningful symbols. The myth of Ikapati is evident of how our ancestors in pre-colonial Philippines celebrate gender variance. The science writer Deborah Rudisill emphasizes that gender crossing is ubiquitous in cultures. The genitalia, as it is not a certain distinguisher of gender. But when the colonizers came, they could not understand such concept. They insisted their violent, narrow worldview. They controlled how we think, vilified our myths, turned our babaylans and shamans into frightening witches, and massacred them. They tried to suppress trans people and other gender variants, and removed us from a rightful place in history. We have been made to believe that trans people and queer people are spawns of the devil, an abomination of nature. But we have always been part of this country's history. Always. The American anthropologist Stuart Schlegel was initially perplexed when he met a Mentifuwalay Libon, or one who becomes a woman, from the Teduray community. She was a celebrated zither player. When he insisted that she was a man, members of the community corrected him and firmly asserted that she was no less of a woman than other cisgender women members of their community. This reflects the insistence of the binary Western worldview and their misconceptions that are insidious. For one of the gravest human flaws is ignorance. What we do not understand, we fear. What we fear, we hate. What we hate, we destroy. And as we are challenging the narratives written by our oppressors, our colonizers, it is essential to tell these stories again, so those who have been abandoned by history can map the genealogy of our diverse, vibrant identities and locate our rightful place in history. This is critical in our struggle to fight for a right to self-determination. For more than 300 years, we were under Spanish colonial rule. Then we were sold off to the United States for $20 million. In 2015, the representative of the Philippines to the Miss Universe was asked about her take on the re-establishing of American military bases in the Philippines. She answered, "I think that the US and the Philippines have always had a good relationship with each other. We were colonized by the Americans, and we have their culture and traditions even up to this day. I think we are very welcoming with the Americans, and I don't see any problem with that at all." While there is a strong resistance against the American military intervention and the Philippines is still subservient to its colonial master, there is a grain of truth in Miss Philippines' answer. And perhaps that is why she was crowned Miss Universe. The relationship she was talking about, though, is remotely good or beneficial to us. It is a persistent, relentless, and habitual inequality that we are enduring every waking day of our lives that has left us desensitized. You see it through our standards of beauty, through our public education, and even through our collective imagination. Long after our leash was extended by our master, or what they like to call an independence, The pillaging continued. Mountains have been flattened to mine gold and minerals that enrich the pockets of our colonizers. Long stretches of rice fields have been converted into banana plantations where fruits are chemically ripened and preserved to reach international groceries fresh. Hectares upon hectares of rainforests are burnt to make way for palm oil so the white man can have his Nutella. A year ago, a thick black cloud hovered above the skies of Borneo that extended to my hometown, making it difficult to fly and posing serious health threats. We lost a multitude of endangered species. And even if they cause us our sufferings, our master still insists their worldview on how we approach our struggle. The white man stinks, and when he sees how we use shampoo, a term derived from the Sanskrit chapati, which means to need to clean ourselves, he steals our invention. He makes it appear that the idea of cleanliness and hygiene came from his empire, infused it with chemicals that could burn your skin, not with the gugu vine, not with the coconut milk, nor with the soapy leaves of gumamela. And hundreds of years later, when mounds of plastic sachets of Unilever and Procter & Gamble are littered on our shores, destroying marine ecosystems, we are blamed for the environment crisis. Our poverty is blamed, not the huge factories that manufacture the garbage. I have seen several vlogs of white tourists making a spectacle of themselves while picking garbage, shaking their heads in disappointment to locals whose day-to-day income could only afford them sachets of essentials. Unknowing that beyond the veil of the white messiah, our forests, mountains, and seas are desecrated in the name of corporate globalization that maintains their country's power over ours. In turn, this affords them to travel around the world without the same racial and economic profiling we go through when we wish to visit their country, so they could point their fingers at us and teach us about zero waste management, green living, and fair trade. The struggle is fraught and still long. Even in the current conversations, marginalized voices are still displaced. They are often centered on dominant white voices. But we will not relent. We will persist. We will continue to speak truth to power, even if our voices tremble. Like the great Ikapati, we will conceive a better world, and we will destroy the world built upon the oppression of our people. For we know that we do not owe our freedoms to anyone. We are free because we fight to be free. The writer Arundhati Roy gently reminds us, our strategy should be not only to confront empire, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own stories. Stories that are different from the ones we are being brainwashed to believe. The corporate revolution will collapse. If we refuse to buy what they are selling, their ideas, their version of history, their wars, their weapons, and their notions of inevitability.
Not
caged bird sings with a fearful trill on things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
Hi.
Can you hear us too? Yeah.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
Okay. So I'm gonna mute. I mute us here then. Yeah. Is it on? Is the live stream on? Right now? 1 second. We mute ourselves here? I'm gonna mute you. Yeah. Yeah, the live stream is on. Okay, cool. We can go then.
Shall I just start? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you both. I listened to the, because it was Act 1 yesterday, and it's been really wonderful to actually experience Act 2 as a continuation or perhaps as a parallel way of narrating. Different positions, but also responding to the spatial reality of the spatial colonial reality. And it's, I'm working with my colleagues of Sonsbeek on creating the program for the assembly end of September. And it's also really like unraveling Radio Kootwijk, the relations, the histories, the ways people have been using radio as a form of broadcasting, as a way of kind of disrupting, organizing forms of solidarity, sharing anti-racist and anti-colonial strategies, pirating, I mean, we can name it. And I really, it made me think about the way I have to say, Botero is amazing storyteller. I mean, the way the voice was used, it's on multiple levels. I really appreciate it. And it's, of course, also in a long thinking about oral literature and ways of storytelling, and how it's a way of archiving, but it's also, of course, a very underappreciated form of collecting knowledge and disseminating knowledge and kind of collectively or as a community becoming knowledge and keeping knowledge, and also keeping archive. And I was really thinking about the Fafifena, the guess the limited translation would be the third gender in the Samo culture, and made me think of work of various artists, and also about how in various cultures there have been, of course, a multiplicity of gender positions beyond the binary of the Western notion or Eurocentric notion of gender. And what does that, how people have been kind of incorporating or owning almost this Western binary through religion, and specifically Christianity more than Islam, because even in Islam there are still a variety of gender positions, and how that has kind of also reshaped kinship, and that was something I was thinking about while listening. And I really also thought about a very small note or comment Ram made about this idea of being in good relationship when one speaks about colonialism. And I thought that's quite an interesting, in various languages I've heard that campaign phrase. And it's also, it made me think about it's so much said in such a small phrase, about like how one is, what does it mean to speak, how does one speak about this loaded, horrific, complicated past. And the other thing that I was thinking about was, the kind of the way in this collaboration a different voice has been centralized that speaks for oneself. And I think it's really wonderful to allow the voice to take up space and to own up space, in a way to kind of return to what Flavia was speaking about yesterday, about what does it, like how do we create emancipatory work, or how can an artist contribute to liberatory work? And I think this was a wonderful example of that. And I mean, not to be a killjoy, I don't know like what type of, relations that are in the backstage of it, of how you all collaborated, but as a listener, it was really interesting to kind of experience in a passive way the presence of this actually a third collaborator. Yeah, so thank you.
Maybe it's because it's relatively early in the morning, but I had an impression that this sound work, if I should call it this way, was something between, it was a revolutionary anthem, but it was also a lullaby. So there was something in it that kind of made me ask about the mode of address through the chosen, kind of, let's say, genre of the sonic intervention, which was a sort of mellow recitation with extremely mellow and slightly, I would say, trancey music in the background occasionally. But it felt to me like it's a form of sonic journey to a faraway land. So it's highly evocative of some images not seen, over there. So kind of created a sort of scape, like a soundscape perhaps, but more trying to evoke a physical location or locations, or maybe locations that are not merely physical in the sense of being like belonging to particular geography or a place, but also that are located within this larger space of the myth, and not a particular myth, but a number of different myths sort of merged together in as a new story in a way, and this story becomes this what I called revolutionary anthem, becoming a sort of lullaby, and that I think has certain, it holds certain questions to me, because I was also thinking that if you replace, proletarians with trans and queer individuals, if you would basically take a revolutionary song, which speaks about the wretched of the earth, and I'm not talking only about International, but about every other song or narration that posits the wretched or proletarians back then in the position of the oppressed who are struggling for emancipation and for eventual shaking off the shackles. Then it seems that the kind of rhetorical maneuver that is performed in your work is basically a substitution of those subjects back then with these subjects being trans and queer individuals across the world. And my question to that would be, about the choice of strategy, or a choice, I wouldn't say methodology, because we are not, I believe that, or at least I want to believe that we are not only talking about an artwork, a sound piece, but we are talking about a certain strategy of survival that might turn into a kind of tactics of liberation that will leave trace, on a planetary scale. I mean, perhaps no less than that. So the question is, what is the strategy chosen to that? Because in comparison to the position of the oppressed for whichever reasons globally back then and now, this call is formulated within the institutional framework of a Dutch art school, and therefore it's, I believe, quite hard to compare, the place from which the call is coming to places from which the cause of the oppressed, say, within the capitalist system 100 years ago were formulated. So if you consider, I don't know, prison letters of Rosa Luxemburg, for instance, which contain a very, very clear vision of what needs to be done, still they are physically written, from the prison. They are not written from a kind of institutional context in which through the kind of academic scholarly research work you can sort of build a genealogy for a future change. So my question is basically about whether there is a possibility of making a step. Making a step that will, thank you, making a step that will be kind of stepping out of safety zone of the institution towards some kind of change that must happen. Because if you compare, the vision that we heard in the narration that was presented in your work or introduced, with the actually existing conditions in many of these countries and in other countries around the world, it doesn't seem that things are changing, and definitely they're not changing in any interesting direction. So I'm not saying that this is only your responsibility to change it, but the question to all of us is, how to make this step, and I have no answer to this question since many, many years. Okay.
Thank you. The next one is a tool which is live stream. So if we can put back the chairs.
ABD vatandaşı olan Steven
Hello. The next presenter is Hassan Özgürtop with The Fall of a Hero. Flavia Dödstan, Amal Lag, and Adam Shimchik will respond to the question, are we in a golden age?
Hi. Thank you very much. I have been making a video series called The Fall of a Hero, and I shared its first part as my teaching presentation last year. And today I will share the second part with you, and first you will see a comparison. This video series is thesis, so I want to provide theory tutors and not luxury of people. Thank you. Also, I want to thank DAI for appreciate support for presenting this. Thank you. Soon again.
Bir fonttan bahsetmiştin en son.
Evet, bir fonttan bahsetmiştim. Bu fonttan ve cihatçı kahramandan bahsetmek istiyorum sana.
Cihatçı kahraman.
Cihatçı kahramandan.
Peki.
Bu bahsedeceğim font, İslam Devleti'nin Ağustos 2014'te YouTube'da yayınladığı bir videoda görüldü. Videonun adı Amerika'ya bir mesajdı. Videonun girişinde Barack Obama konuşuyor. Sonra ABD Hava Gücü'nün İslam Devleti unsurlarına düzenlediği bir saldırının görüntülerini görüyoruz. Ardından siyah zemin üzerine beyaz harflerle yazılmış Amerika'ya bir mesaj yazısı görülüyor. Sonra çorak bir arazide Muhammed Emmazi isimli bir militanla yanında düz çökmüş halde gazeteci James Foley görüyoruz. Foley 1973'te Birleşik Devletler'de doğmuş bir gazeteciydi. Suriye'de çalışırken Kasım 2012'de kimliği belirsiz kişilerce kaçırıldı ve uzun süre kendisinden haber alınamadı. Videoda önce Foley, ardından Emmazi bir konuşma yapıyor. Sonra da Emmazi Foley'i öldürüyor. Videonun sonunda Emmazi bir başka ABD vatandaşı olan Steven Sotloff'la görüyoruz. Emmazi daha sonra Sotloff, David Haynes, Alan Henning, Peter Kasich ve Kenji Goto'nun da böyle aynı James Foley gibi öldürülüşünü gösteren videolarda yer aldı. Bu videolar epey ses getiren videolar oldu. Ve bu videolarla birlikte Emmazi, İslam Devleti propagandasının ikonik bir figürü haline geldi. Medya kuruluşlarında sıkça yer aldı ve Cihatçı John olarak isimlendirildi. Şimdi şu var, videonun girişinde görülen Amerika'ya bir mesaj yazısı birbirine benzeyen iki fontla yazılmış. yazının bir mesaj kısmı bahsini ettiğim fontla, Trajan isimli fontla yazılmış. Ben örgütün yayınladığı propaganda materyaline baktıkça fark ettim ki aslında İslam Devleti devamlı bu fontu kullanıyor yayınlarında. Sadece videolarda da değil, yayınladıkları dijital dergilerde de sık sık görüyoruz bu fontu. Mesela Rumia isimli dergilerinin logosunu Trajan ile tasarlamışlar.
Rumia mi?
Evet, Rumia, Roma demek.
Roma, evet.
Sonra mesela Konstantiniye diye bir dergileri var. Onun da bütün manşetlerini Trajan ile yazmışlar. Fransızca bir dergileri var, Darül İslam. Onun da logosu Trajan ile yapılmış. Davut diye başka bir dergileri var. Derginin ilk sayısının tüm kapağı kaplayan manşeti Trajan ile yazılmış. Sonraki sayıların manşetlerinde de Trajan fontunu kullanmışlar.
Tanıdık bir font mu?
Tabii Hollywood'da falan da çok popüler bu. The Last Samurai, The Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Star Wars Battlefront, bütün bu filmlerin logolarının ve posterlerinin tasarımında falan Trajan fontu kullanılmış. Video oyunlarında da yine aynı şekilde. Böyle ortaçağ savaş, suikast, din, egemenlik, ne bileyim, güç, ihtişam falan gibi temalara sahip video oyunlarında hep Trajan fontunu sıklıkla görürsün yani. Yani nerede bir savaş var, nerede bir epik bir olay varsa aslında Trajan fontu orada. Bazı siyasi liderler de kullanıyorlar bu fontu. Bu örneğin Erdoğan'ın resmi Twitter hesabının header görseli. Bu fontu Carol Twombly Adobe için tasarlamış. 1989 yılında piyasaya sürülmüş bu font. Trajan fontu bu.
İsmi de tanıdık geliyor bana, Trajan.
Evet, Trajan biraz tanıdık bir isim. Roma İmparatoru var değil mi Trajan?
Trajan, Roma İmparatoru.
Trajan sütunu var Roma'da. İşte bu fontla İmparator Trajan arasında bir bağ olup olmadığına göz attığımda gördüm ki Twombly bu fontu Roma'daki Trajan sütununun kitabesindeki yazıyı baz alarak tasarlamış. Kitabe bu. Bu da Trajan sütunu. Bu sütun Roma'daki Trajan Forumu'nun kuzeybatı tarafına 107-113 yılları arasında Senato ve Roma halkı tarafından dikilmiş. Sütunun üzerinde spiral biçimde oyulmuş 155 adet fresk var. Trajan önderliğindeki Roma İmparatorluğu ile Dakya arasında yaşanmış iki savaşı kronolojik olarak tasvir ediyor bu freskler. Bu fresklerde askerleri görüyoruz, savaş sahnelerini görüyoruz, İmparator Trajan'ı görüyoruz. Ve yani bu dikili taşın aslında herhangi bir gündelik ya da pratik bir işlevi yok yani. Tamamen İmparator Trajan'ın siyasi erkinin ve askeri kudretinin bir ifadesi olarak orada bulunuyor. Ama ilginç bir nokta var. Bu sütun önemli bir değişikliğe uğratılmış. Orijinalinde sütunun tepesinde İmparator Trajan'ın yaklaşık 5 metre uzunluğunda bir heykeli varmış. Sonra 1588'de İmparator Trajan'ın heykeli kaldırılmış, yerine St. Peter'in heykeli dikilmiş. Yani Pagan İmparator'un heykelinin yerine Hristiyanlığın en önemli figürlerinden birinin heykeli dikiliyor.
Taht değişimi gibi bir şey.
Evet, tahta başka birine oturtuyorlar ama taht sabit yani, sütun yıkılmıyor. Ama Roma İmparatorluğu'nun kahramanları, Trajan'ın askerleri artık St. Peter'in emrine giriyor. Yani Pagan kahramanlar Hristiyan kahramanlara dönüşüyor. Yani aslında hikaye sürüyor özünde, anladın mı? Bu belirli temaların ve merkezdeki kahraman mitolojisinin birbirinden çok farklı zaman kesitlerinde farklı ideolojiler tarafından tekrar kullanıldığını görüyoruz. Yani. Ve aslında İslam Devleti de Akdeniz çevresinde oluşmuş bu bir tür kahramanlık mitolojisine dahil oluyor aslında. Bunun cisimleştiği şey de Roma İmparatorluğu. Zaten Roma'ya öykünme, Roma sevdası bitmez biliyorsunuz. Mussolini'de de vardı bu, Nazilerde de vardı. Böyle, tıpkı St. Peter'in İmparator Trajan'ın tahtını ele geçirişi gibi İslam Devleti'nin cihat tüccarı da St. Peter'in tahtına göz dikmiş gibi görünüyor.
Nasıl yani?
Bak bu örgütün Davut isimli dergisinin 4. sayısının kapağına bak. Vatikan burası. St. Peter meydanındaki dikili taş. Trajan sütunundan sadece 2 kilometre uzaklıkta. Tepesine kendi bayraklarını dikmişler Photoshop'la. Yani tıpkı St. Peter'in takipçilerin Trajan sütununa yaptığı gibi St. Peter dikili taşına kendi ikonlarını dikmeyi arzuluyorlar. The Failed Crusade yazısı da Trajan fontuyla yazılmış bu arada. Yani İmparator Trajan, St. Peter, İslam Devleti hepsi bu kapakta bir arada. Yani bu 2000 yıldır süren bu iktidar mücadeleleri aslında Roma'daki dikili taşların tepesine hangi kahraman egemen olacağı fantezileriyle ilgili. İmparator Trajan mı olacak, St. Peter mi olacak yoksa cihatçı John mu olacak? Bir de bu videolarla Trajan sütunu arasındaki benzerlikler fonttan ibaret değil. Sütundaki fresklerde imparatorluk askerleri düşmanlarını öldürüyor. Kafalarını kesiyor. Yağma yapıyor. İşkenceler yapıyor. Bir karizmatik lider olarak İmparator Trajan'ı görüyoruz. Bu temaların hepsini İslam Devleti'nin videolarında da görüyoruz. Yani bu temalarda ne var? Kutsal bir amaç var, karizmatik liderlik var, erkek kardeşlerden oluşan acımasız bir savaşçı sınıf var, güç ve zafer arzusu var, aşağılanmaya son verme var, böyle kaybedilen onuru geri kazanma fantezisi var. Geçmişte kalmış bir altın çağa dönüş fantezisi var. Mesela şu görüntülere bak şimdi.
This is the return of the Gold D9.
Senin bir de YouTube kanalın varmış.
Evet.
Para kazanıyor musun bari?
Yok, para yok ama yavaş yavaş artmaya başladı takipçi sayım. Böyle bir kemik bir izleyici kitlesi oluşmaya başladı. 17 abonem var şimdi kanalda.
İyi. Şu altın çağ meselesinden devam edelim mi? O ilgi çekici biraz. Altın jenerasyon diyorsun ya bir de.
Olur, oradan devam edelim.
Biraz daha şey yapalım mı o konuyu? Açalım mı? Oradan devam edelim yani.
Olur, olur. Bu Godfather 2'de bir sahne var ya mesela.
Hı hı.
Tom Hagen ailenin eski liderlerinden Frank Pentancelli ile görüşüyor. Aralarında şöyle bir diyalog geçiyor orada.
You were always interested in politics, history? I remember you talking about Hitler back in '33.
I still read a lot. I get good stuff in there.
You were around the old-timers who dreamed of how the family should be organized, how to be based among the old Roman legions and call them regimes, the capos and the soldiers. And it worked.
Yeah, it worked. Those were great old days, you know. And we was like the Roman Empire. The Corleone family was like the Roman Empire.
It was once.
Eski günleri muhteşem günler olarak niteliyor. Böyle bir zamanlar Roma İmparatorluğu gibiydik diyor. Böyle Corleone ailesinin eski günlerini Roma İmparatorluğu'na benzetiyor. Ama sonra işler kötüye gitmiş. Yani işte bahsettiğim aslında Selefi cihatçının temel motivasyon noktası da burası yani. Faşist hareketlerde falan da olan şey. Yani ideolojinin kurucuları ilk dönemde büyük bir emperyal güce erişmiş. Büyük İslam devleti kurulmuş, her şey süper. Ama birkaç jenerasyon sonra ümmet o kurucu değerlerden uzaklaştığı için o güç kaybedilmiş. Mesela Safevi İmparatorluğu, Babür İmparatorluğu, Ming Hanedanlığı birer altın çağdır birileri için. İşte bu yüzden böyle altın çağ ile emperyal gücün hep böyle yan yana olduğunu görürsün aslında bu örneklere baktığında. Mesela aslında Trump'ın mesela Make America Great Again'i de biraz böyle bir şeydir ya. Yani Amerika muhteşemdi ama bir zamanlar. Yani şimdi değil. Onu tekrar o eski altın günlerine kavuşturmak gerek. İşte Trump da o eski altın günlerini tekrar getirecek kurtarıcı işte. Ya da ne bileyim bu Erdoğan'ın yeni Osmanlıcılığı böyle bir şeydir yani. Ayasofya'yı cami yaptı ya mesela en son. Diyanet İşleri Başkanı elinde kılıçla minbere çıktı falan. O Doğu Roma İmparatorluğu'nun sembol yapısını tekrar fethediyorsun yani. Trajan sütununun tekrar fethedilmesi gibi bir şey. Yani oradan yeni bir imparatorluk hikayesinin, yani imparatorluk hikayesinin üstüne böyle başka bir hikaye kurmaya çalışıyorsun. Hatta demin mesela Konstantiniye dergisinden bahsettim ya, onun kapağına tekrar bak.
Evet.
Konstantiniye'nin fethi, Ayasofya'yı görüyorsun arkada. İmparatorluk iştahı bu yani. Altın çağ ve öze dönüş hikayeleri böyle iş yapar bazen. Zaten aslında ideolojinin o pür özünde bir sorun yoktur da, onda hala her şey doğrudur da sorun zaten ondan uzaklaşmış olmaktır. Yani ondan uzaklaşıldığından beri ümmet aşağılanmaya başlamıştır. O yüzden böyle bir aşağılanma lafı falan çok egemendir bu İslam devletinin söylemine. Bir eziklik vardır yani özünde. Biraz kolonyalizm karşısındaki hizmetin mirası yani. Bu aşağılanmaya son vermek için devrimci bir kopuş gerçekleştirip o pür kaynağa geri dönmek gerek ve ümmeti uykusundan uyandırmak gerek. Şimdi bu yüzden mevcut vaziyetten, kitle hareketinden falan kopup bir öncü müfreze oluşturmak gerekir. Bu öncü müfreze işte altın jenerasyon gibi bir şey yani. SS ya da Hitler gençliğini düşün mesela. Onlar da böyledir ya, bir öncü nesil şeysi vardır yani. İşte bunun için de senin sıradan adamları seçkin kahramanlar olabileceklerini ikna etmen gerekir. Şimdi macera çağrısı dediğim şey bu müfrezeye bir çağrı, kahraman olmaya bir çağrı yani aslında. Şimdi mesela örgütün Temmuz 2016'da yayınladığı bir video var. Çağrı alan ve çağrıyı kabul eden bir kahramanın yolculuğunu aşama aşama anlatıyor bu video. Adı da Macera Çağrı'nın öyküsü. 10 dakika uzunluğunda video kurgu. Video, örgütün kontrolü altındaki yerleşim birimlerinin bombalanışını gösteren görüntülerle başlıyor. Yıkıntılar arasında ölü ve yaralı siviller görülüyor. Ardından hikaye anlatıcının bir sayfaya o kentin çocuklarından birinin hikayesi yazmasıyla öykü başlıyor. Genç bir erkeği yıkıntılar arasında yürürken görüyoruz. Üzgün ve yılgın bir ifadeyle etrafındaki yıkıntılara bakıyor. Bombalanan sivilleri, çocukları gözünde canlandırıyor o esnada. Sonra buradan ayrılıyor, gündelik yaşamına dönüyor. Sonra bir gün parkta, bankta otururken cep telefonundan İslam Devleti'nin bir propaganda videosunu izliyor. İşte aslında maceraya çağrıyla karşılaştığı an tam da bu propaganda videosunu izlediği an yani. İşte videoyu izliyor, çağrıyı cevaplamak istiyor ve örgüte katılmaya karar veriyor. Eve gidiyor, eşyalarını topluyor, işte sevdikleriyle vedalaşıyor falan. Ve yani aslında çitlerin ötesine geçiyor yani. Artık örgütün bir parçası oluyor. İşte askeri talimler ve dini eğitimler alarak kendini geliştiriyor. Böyle mevcut yetkinliklerini aşıyor, bilinç ufkunu genişletiyor. Yani şimdi burada macera çağrısını cevaplayarak o edilgen gündelik hayatını terk ediyor. Böyle artık bir silahı var, üniforması var falan yani. Kurtarıcı bir savaşçı sınıfın ferdi artık. O videonun başındaki o pespaye, ezik görünümlü kişiliği falan artık yok yani. Artık böyle kendine güveni olan bir savaşçı erkek bundan böyle kimlik sahibi oluyor ve bir özneye, kahramana dönüşüyor. Videonun sonunda böyle üniforması, silahıyla ufka bakarken, manzaraya, geleceğe bakarken görüyoruz. Artık kötülükleri yenecek ve yeryüzüne altın çağı geri getirecek. Yani mevcut kişiliğini öldürerek bir üst aşamada yeniden doğuyor aslında. Bir dönüşüm, bir tür yeniden doğuş hikayesi var burada yani.
Evet.
Bir de bu dönüşüm, geçiş ve yeniden doğuş hikayelerinde hep bir takım ritüeller eşlik eder ya. Mesela sünnet bile böyle bir şeydir aslında. Düğünümüz yapılır falan. Yetişkinliğe geçiş ritüelleri böyledir. Törenler yapılır. Kabul törenleri böyledir. Mafya kabul törenleri falan vardır ya mesela filmlerde falan da olur. Evlilik törenleri de böyledir.
Sen hiç evlendin mi ya?
Yok, hayır.
Neden?
Ne bileyim.
Bitiyor. Sen devam.
Mesela başka bir video var. 2014'te yayınlandı bu video. Bir grup Fransız militanı görüyoruz bu videoda. Pasaportlarını yakıyorlar hep birlikte. Mesela bence bu da bir geçiş ritüeli yani aslında. Mesela pasaport nedir?
Nasıl nedir?
Yani ne bilgiler vardır içinde mesela?
Senin milliyetini, vatandaşını gösterir.
Evet, başka?
Ne başka?
Yani pasaportunda senin adın vardır mesela. İşte sana ailen tarafından verilmiş, böyle daha sen doğmadan belirlenmiş adın. Doğum tarihin vardır. İşte hangi ulusun mensubu olduğun vardır. Hangi devletin vatandaşı olduğun vardır. Seyahat geçmişin vardır. Yani seni tanımlar yani. Ve bu belge bütün devletler tarafından tanınan bir belgedir. Yani bu aslında seni bir özne olarak resmi kayıt altına alan uluslararası bir belgedir yani. İşte bunlar da bunu yapıyorlar orada. Birbirini tanıyan devletler tarafından tanınan kişiliklerini öldürüyorlar ve bir paradigmanın dışına çıkıyorlar bu ritüelle. Burada amaç sadece bu geçişi yapan kişiyi etkilemek değil yani topluluk bir sözleşme yeniler ya aslında böyle ritüellerde. Bu yüzden bu militanlar da gidip tek başlarına yakmazlar pasaportlarını yani böyle topluca yaparlar. Videosunu çekerler ve propaganda malzemesi olarak kullanırlar. Yeni bir özne olarak tekrar doğarlar orada. Bir de bunu yaparlar, bir de böyle yeni bir isim alırlar örgüte katıldıktan sonra.
Kod isim.
Evet, kod isim. İşte örgüte katılan herkes yeni bir isim alır. Mesela örgütün lideri, halife, Bağdadi'nin gerçek adı İbrahim Ali el-Bedri el-Samarri'dir. Şişani'nin adı Arkan Batıraşvili'dir. Adnani'nin gerçek adı Taha Suddi Falaha'dır. Ve bu sadece İslam Devleti'ne özgü bir uygulama değildir aslında. Hemen hemen tüm örgütlerde vardır bu güvenlik sebebiyle falan. Ama bence bunun politik mistik bir tarafı da var. Yani militan sıktığı ilk kurşunla kendi kişiliğini öldürüyor aslında. Böyle sonra yepyeni biri olarak yeniden doğuyor yani.
Bir saniye geleceğim şimdi. Bir saniye geleceğim şimdi. Kapatıyorum.
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Can everyone hear me as well? Thank you so much, Hassan, for this film, which I found extremely poignant and interesting and very multi-layered as well. I really appreciate it. the different facets. Your film has a bit of a prismatic quality, which means that it has different faces and different facets to it, and each of them around the topic. I mean, of course, there is the whole issue around identity, but even that you're approaching in a very multifaceted way, because on the one hand, we have the marketing identity through media, the font, but we also have the issues around identity through belonging to organizations, whether it's the mafia or the Make America Great Again movement or ISIS. However, all of these different facets, what I feel is that they have one thing in common, and it's an exploration of a certain type of masculinity. And I found that very interesting, because without necessarily saying this is about a certain type of masculinity, this is what the film ends up being about. Of course, it's a very patriarchal and one would dare say violent form of masculinity. And I really like the way that you threaded all these different versions, the Western European, Italian heritage, and the US neo-fascist Trumpian race, and then ISIS. And what I really like is that you without actually having to say it out loud, you manage to show the common roots and the common operative ways of all these different forms of masculinity that manifest with identical violence and an identical need for conquest. And I thought that that was very well executed in the film. Another thing that I really found interesting, of course, from a marketing perspective, we know how brands create identity. But I found it very interesting how you managed to show that it's not just brands in the corporate sense, that ideology also carries the same design of identity and the same appeal to emotion and to sentimentality through visuals, through fonts, and it's all very explicit design, which again, I found that it was very poignant in your film, how you managed to thread these, to show these, the way that these different identities are not like gratuitous or haven't come up randomly, but they have been specifically designed to appeal to these emotions. And I thought you were very, very effective in doing that. Again, I thought that I really found it interesting because in the West, we tend to have, in Northern Europe or in the Netherlands specifically, there is a very strong right-wing sentiment where we are supposed to look at ISIS as if they were outliers, as if ISIS was the manifestation of a violent ideology that is unique to the Middle East. And the way that your film threaded these different facets of violent masculinity, it's very clear that not only ISIS is not unique, a unique manifestation of violence, but this same violence is present across the West in ways that we have naturalized it and that we no longer see it as such. And I thought that that was very effective. Another thing that I liked, and I don't know if this was on purpose or not, is that the parts where you speak, it looks a bit like an interrogation room. And I thought if it was on purpose or not, but it also added another layer to this whole thing around ISIS, because you are, of course, a Turkish man, and you come from this regime as well, which you mentioned with Erdogan. So the fact that you're sitting there and we don't know who you are engaging with, I felt that there was an element of interrogation, like the presence of the state, where you have to explain yourself. And I thought that was very interesting as well visually. And like I said, I think that your film, and if this is a project that you will continue working on or you will continue developing, I really enjoyed this multifaceted aspect of the same phenomenon. And I thought that there is a very rich tapestry there that you could continue exploring if you wish to. So thank you for that.
Hello. I'm Adam. Yeah, I was wondering if there is something evil about this Roman fonts, something inherently evil to them, to this Trajan font, you know, because what I found interesting is that your video itself is very persuasive. One really gets into the narration and one makes connections quickly. The argumentation is super convincing. The genealogies that you establish are similarly convincing. So I was wondering about the setting and about the setting in which you recorded the video. So the camera from above and this little room which reminds you of certain type of snuff movies. The videos leaked from interrogation and detention cells around the world that occasionally end up with the killing of the subject. And I was wondering if the way you ended, with the killing of the detained mostly, occasionally also with the killing of a cop or whoever is there. And I was wondering if the way you ended this video, which ends on a kind of strange pause where the interrogator is asking for a short break and switches off the camera, was further pushing us into this genre. So I read the work very much as a sort of palette of very particular genres that are often deployed for a variety of reasons and to various ideological ends, as you very convincingly indeed demonstrated, from Trajan to Trump. And it's interesting because I think I saw the Trajan column not in its, so to say, first and original edition, but I saw a replica in Bucharest, Romania, where it is contained within, as far as I remember, it's contained within a sort of museum building. So you kind of confronted, from very close with this processions of murderous gentlemen and their conquered victims. But what I wanted to say is that these columns and obelisks, they have tendency to travel. So basically, they themselves become trophies and spoils of wars. So the obelisk is per se a kind of transportable currency, I would say. It's something that can belong to anyone and can perform a variety of functions, and so do this innocent fonts, because the one designed by Carol Twombly, and thank you for introducing the very interesting genealogy of the font, because as I understand, she was working for Adobe. So she was working in the center of the empire, so the nature of this takeover becomes even more poignant if you consider the very birthplace of the font. But she designed this font in the early 80s, and I think I'm not a typography specialist, but for the look, it reminds me very much of, it's the same kind of family and origin of fonts as those used by Peter Saville for the factory records, early Joy Division covers like Closer and others. So Peter Saville chose the font which was originally, it was cut in stone in the 2nd century of our era in a Roman world. And, he kind of subversively deployed it to the most bleak and, definitely rather, I would say, subversive form of music that, the early Joy Division records certainly were. So the interesting thing is to I think, also think about the possibility of a kind of critical détournement of these ways of communicating, which you showed so clearly through analogies between the ISIS and others who use the same visual language as video games and so forth. But this is a part of the world in which this, let's say, artistic forms and genres are used, but there exist also other more interesting, I think, and more productive ways of appropriating these tools and kind of meddling with these narrations that are established by all these brave men wearing uniforms or wielding their swords. But okay, thank you very much, and good luck with the work.
Hi, thank you for the work. A lot has been said already. I just wanted to tap into that it was interesting to see this investigation into, for me, using almost the aesthetics of the YouTube conspiracy land, and the way that type of, the way YouTube storytelling or the type of storytelling is kind of narrated, manipulated, and performed. And also, I like the kind of dry humor. Thought it was interesting that you used quite a lot of the elements that they used, the dry humor, this type of dropping and name dropping, like fake news as facts, or fake elements as facts, presenting oneself as the expert. Because one has researched. So I really thought this, it was interesting that you incorporated that. The other thing that for me was, there are two other things that I felt was quite interesting to kind of experience. One was, I used to make jokes about ISIS guys going to the Rietveld design department. And I used to make this joke because the aesthetics were like so close to like some of the cool Dutch design typography and aesthetics that was hype at the moment. But to me, it says a lot more. It says a lot about like how so many of the young men and women grew up in the West, grew up in Europe, are well versed in the visual language of Europe, know how to communicate, consumed, whether they even grew up in Iraq or Somalia or wherever in the world, they consumed a lot of Hollywood. They really consumed the West, and then decided to mirror the Western imperialist language and its visual aesthetics. And to me, it was almost like what they would call, like in digital language, like a aesthetical imperialist clapback, like you give something back almost as a punchline, and that has been the language. And I have to say, I used to get a lot of you also have this other world, like I call it the Muslim aesthetic Ummah world that goes via WhatsApp. So there are all these memes, and they use the same type of typography, but there's a lot of photoshopped realities. Like let's say, you know, a forest is burning down and the word Allah is, the fire wrote the word Allah. And it's these type of blessings that are shared amongst Muslims from various countries, in various languages. And I thought it was also interesting that you incorporated that type of, you know, like almost natural elements. And I thought it was also, for me, the other part that's fascinating is that how much of it is also the aesthetics is influenced, especially by the Ottoman and kind of the empires, the Ottoman Empire, this kind of the politic of the nostalgia, like we're wanting the desire to go back to a time where also many of us were like subjugated to different forms of oppression. But I thought it was interesting that the visual material, the way it was compiled, it dove into this type of, you know, the Ottoman Empire, and on the other hand, I don't know if you've seen, maybe it's big in Turkey, but I know, like, spending time in the Middle East and the UAE as a small child, and even growing up in the Netherlands, there was these TV shows that, like, narrate the world of the Prophet Muhammad, and the way they dress, the horses, the clothing. I thought it was also interesting that you brought that together. And for me, it's a different colonial language. Like, you know, it's not the Western colonial language, but it's this kind of collective performance of the Arab colonial visual language, and also return to an Arab colonial imaginative world. And that was so strong part of ISIS. And it's also, it is indeed the world where patriarchy deems those who are kind of seen as rubbish in the West, or, you know, disregarded in the West, as heroes. And I think that to me was interesting, that you all put that in the mesh of the YouTube form of storytelling. And I'm curious, like, where it would go after this. And many other things I wanted to mention has been said a lot. So thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Hello? Hello? Yeah. Okay.
Hello? No? Oh. Okay. Can you please give us some audience instead of, yeah, thanks. Next presenter is Simon van Sarlos with Science Without Men, the musical. Finally. Flavia Dodstan, Amit Esrey, and Adam Shimchik will respond to the question, how high can you go? Does anyone ever sing in the hallways of this institute? I remember asking Prof. Dr. Ben at the start of my 3-month artist residency at the Nanoscience Institute. Ben said, no. Maybe you hear someone whistling, but singing would be too disruptive. Ben and I talked about being a person of color in the white, rational, masculine space of science. He said it rather rendered questions of race unimportant. It gets too uncomfortable, he added. Weeks after my residency ended, he sent me an email. He was thinking about quitting. Questioning, he wrote, is contagious. I'd like to think singing is too.
I have a demonic plan. I want to find the ghosts. So my thesis starts with a narrative. And it starts at a nanoscience institute in Delft, where I did a residency. And of course, it doesn't start there. It starts with growing up in a household where binary knowledge reigns, in a heterosexual household with a mom and a dad, a storyteller and a scientist. And of course, it doesn't start there because there's ancestors involved and society and being Dutch. But for now, this narrative starts at a nanoscience institute in Delft, where I did a residency, and I was enormously excited. I had been reading Denise Ferreira da Silva, so I thought quantum physics is where it happens and is where we can imagine the world otherwise, right? We can end the world as we know it or end how we know it. And I thought about black quantum futurism and about entanglement, and I thought about nonlinear time. I thought about ghosts. I thought about gossip. I thought about spooky entanglement, metaphor, gesture, performance. But then I went to the institute and I encountered something completely different. I encountered something, instead of the sort of spooky entanglement and a non-linear time and all those things that should not be familiar and that would have helped imagining otherwise, I encountered exactly what felt familiar: a white, rational, masculine space. And of course, this space doesn't look like that because it looks exactly neutral and truth-finding objective-oriented. Kind of like this space can feel. And you see that finding knowledge appears innocent, and the quest for knowledge becomes natural somehow. And the scientists in the Institute, they really felt like they're open and curious people. That's sort of the stigma that goes around. We're open and curious. And the demand to know is almost noble. So if you're familiar with Gloria Wecker's work, White Innocence, you start to wonder, okay, how is the idea of the Netherlands as a kennisland, a knowledge country, related to a projection of nationalism in a sort of innocent claim of wanting to acquire knowledge? And that's something for a 2-hour musical show. But I want to know becomes an innocent quest. I want to see, I want to see, I want to see, I want to see, I want to see, I want to see deeper than you can see. I want to see, I want to see, I want to see deeper than you can see. I want to see, I want to see deeper than you can see. I want to see deeper than you can see. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. And if I don't understand, I'm gonna define. Zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify. And if I don't understand, I'm gonna define. And if I don't understand, I'm gonna define. Once more. Zoom. And if I don't understand, I'm gonna define. Great. So when I went to the Institute, I was inspired by a lecture of Richard Feynman in the 50s, when he was talking about nanoscience and explaining how the technological developments that helped to magnify, zoom, zoom, zoom, magnify, help to get towards a nanoscience, help towards get another understanding. And you see here that the visual is very important, right? Like visualizing makes a potential or a possibility of classifying, makes truth. So he said, Richard Feynman in his lecture, he said, there's plenty of space at the bottom. There's plenty of space at the bottom. So at first when I heard this and I was unfamiliar with nanoscience, I thought super inspiring. I was thinking about the concept of abundance, the idea of not thinking from scarcity. For example, survival of the fittest always implies that some things are left behind or some things are non-existent. So what if we think from abundance? There's plenty of space at the bottom. Great. But then being in this rational white masculine space, thinking, okay, so wait, this bottom exists only when we have seen it. And who is this we, of course? Richard Feynman has seen it, a US physicist. He said there's plenty of room at the bottom. What he meant? He imagined the head of a pin, which can be confusing if you're a visual thinker. The head of a pin sounds like the top, but no, this is the bottom. Imagine the head of a pin, and if we zoom in on it, it suddenly looks very spacious. And when we zoom in on it, and we have the right technology, we can inscribe it with a library. I think he actually proposed the British dictionary. We can inscribe it because there's plenty of room at the bottom. So when the bottom is seen, it's seen as inactive, passive, inert, waiting for alteration. Without changing it, as the scientist looking from above, the bottom is not anything. It's not classified. It's only there and valuable when we see it. We can think of Catherine Yusuf, A Billion Black Anthropocenes or None, and how she describes the ground, demonic ground, being inert, always evoking a response, at least from the scientist's perspective, the rational white mind. The bottom, the bottom, the bottom. So I was trying to think about the bottom from many different perspectives in my thesis. The hold of the ship, the BDSM bottom, because common conception is that the bottom is nothing without the top, which is not true. The bottom can be so many things. The bottom, the bottom, the bottom. But then, of course, I'm complying to all these thesis rules. Florian, I think, is happy. With the MLA Chicago, another kind of inscription. So I thought, how can I share with you some of my thesis? Because I am genuinely excited, actually, about the content. So I thought, okay, what to do? Because, of course, I'm affirming another hierarchy with this thesis and, like, taking up all the references. So I thought I'm going to make a musical. The bottom, the bottom, the bottom, the bottom, the bottom, the bottom. Why a musical? I was thinking about the Art Academy, which we're in right now. It also can seem like a neutral space. And I was thinking about my girlfriend who teaches at a theater school, and she would say, well, as long as I've given them some critical thought, if they go up, they leave school and they go into musical after that, you know, at least I've given them some critical thought. So this made me wonder about the musical being sort of underappreciated in art school. So I wanted to make a musical. But then I was wondering, well, what kind of a form is this if I'm applying a genre or taking up a genre without much training? And like, what does that mean? Is this a form of taking up something that is like taking space in a genre that isn't mine at all or that I haven't studied? So I called in Joy Wilkins to teach us about musical. And of course, you probably already figured out that there's a loop here, because I'm inviting authority on musical, because she's an authority, I think, on musical, to teach us about musical while defying that binary hierarchy. But let's bring Joy in, because she's a joy. Hallo?
Hallo.
Hey.
Hoor je mij?
Ik hoor jou.
Oh, wat goed.
Ja, en zie je me ook?
Ik zie jou, ja.
Oh ja, ik zie jou ook. Heel goed.
Hey.
Hi. So as I told you, I'm going to be playing a one-time musical show.
Ja.
Science. Hallo?
Hallo.
Hey.
Hoor je mij?
Ik hoor jou.
Oh, wat goed.
Ja, en zie je me ook?
Ik zie jou, ja.
Oh ja, ik zie jou ook. Heel goed.
Hey.
Hi. So as I told you, I'm gonna be playing a one-time musical show,
Yeah.
Science Without Man, and I need some advice, basically.
I played in several small and big musicals. So I think the biggest one I played in was Disney's The Lion King. I did that for 14 months in Germany, Hamburg. I played in the Buddy Holly story. I'm going to play in Falsettos this fall. And I did some small time musicals like Shaco, some Dutch things, and some jazz musicals about Louis Armstrong, about Billie Holiday. Yeah. Musical basically just means theater on music, and it can be anything. It's also said that sometimes musicals, the actors, they express themselves very explicitly. So they would, for example, say, "Oh my God, I'm coming into the room, and then I saw her. I was shaken." Like it's all sang, and it's all the inner world, and nothing is played. Everything is said with words.
Interesting to me is like if you would think about it not from a terms of accessibility or like intellectual accessibility or something like that, but thinking about it from the perspective of time or velocity, like instead of having, because if you want to sing one thought, it's going to take a long time where you are just quicker when you do not sing it. So, yeah.
And music works differently because you're gonna sing that thought, but you're gonna sing it and then you're gonna repeat it because every song has a structure that we all know. You have the phrases and then you have the refreinen that you repeat in the middle, and then there always has to be a high note where you're gonna sing "I'm lost," and then that lost needs to be 10 seconds long. So in terms of time, musical is way stretched out.
Yeah.
But then it does sometimes touch people in a certain way because it is music, and music touches people differently than words.
So this sentence that I sent you by Evelyn Hammonds, who's a history of science professor, so not a musical writer, but the sentence is, "The observer outside of the black hole sees it as a void, an empty place in space. However, it is not empty. It is a dense and full place in space." How would you sing that?
Would you make it into a ballad and make it sort of sad and give it a sad emotion, like there's a black hole, but it's actually not a void, but it's a mystery, but how do we feel about that? I mean, yeah, that's sort of, how would you interpret that piece of text? So then I could imagine if you're excited about that, you would, for example, sing it fast with notes that express that feeling of excitement that there is something, even though we cannot see it, but we imagine that it's there.
But like if it has to be musically dramatic, it would be like the dense and full maybe, and place and space and whole and void would get a lot of
emphasis.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with musical is that it gets emphasis, but not too much, because it is a monologue of music. So you cannot, if you highlight all these words, then we just miss context. So you have to keep on talking, but you're actually singing. That's the idea.
Okay.
So you would probably say it the way the rhythm would be probably the observer outside of the black hole sees it as a void. There would be one line.
Yeah.
I would just make something up, but it's probably not musical. But if you say, "The observer outside of the black hole sees it as a void, an empty space in space, space, space, space. However, it is not empty. It is a dense and full of place in space. It is a full place in space. Black hole, black hole." It's, I don't know, you compose.
That's perfect.
Music, but you can make up anything. It could also be different. I mean, for example, if you would give me the first line and then I add and then you add again and then I add again.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do that?
Okay. Yeah, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. The observer outside of the black hole sees it as a void.
An empty space in space.
However, it's not empty.
It is a dense, dense, dense and full place in space. Full place in space. Is it a black hole? Is it a black hole? Is it a black? They often do very off notes. Yeah, they like to do that in musicals. Like, how is that even in the scale? Oh yeah, and then they make it very weird. But that's a possibility. You can sing it any way you want. If it would be a ballad, for example, it would be very slow and the observer outside of the black hole sees it as a void, an empty space. In space. They like to do always like out of the blue high notes. Yeah. To be a high note that it's challenging for the singers, like, oh my God, am I gonna make that high E every night? This wasn't a high E. Yeah.
Because I think I saw you on June 1st when the anti-racism protest was happening in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Did you like not shout because of your voice?
I had a mask on. How could you see I was shouting or not shouting?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
I'm a singer, so I don't often. I think I'm over aware of my voice. That shouting in a crowd is not something I would easily do because you very easily damage your voice, and because I make money with my voice, even though it was for the cause and for the struggle. I was like, if I'm not going to be able to make my money, then there's not even going to be me. So, and because I do all of it, I have a lot of respect for musical actors because most of the time people sort of look down on them or frown upon them while they don't know. It might not be as challenging mentally, but it's challenging physically. And for me, that's just as difficult to have the physical intelligence to perform 8 shows a week is tough and deserves respect in my eyes and makes it high art. Yeah.
No, I think it fits actually perfectly with the thesis that I'm going to try to make into a musical, because it's actually like bringing in physical knowledge into the space where head or intellectual knowledge is perceived as the truth or the objectivity or the knowledge. So it all fits really well.
Just make sure you sing one high note. I'm curious how high you can go.
I'm curious how high you can go. I'm curious how high you can go.
With the thesis, maybe more successful than with the musical, but then again, what is successful? I hope to contribute to dismantling the possibility of even thinking a differentiation between high and low. Thank you.
I would wonder how you ended up on the residency in the Nanoscience Institute, but the rule here is that we don't ask questions, so maybe I ask later. Yeah, and whether there will be any further connection between the nanoscience and the type of knowledge into which you inquired in this piece, which I think is perhaps a part of a future 2-hour musical. So I see it very much as a sort of intro, or more like a presentation, so embodied presentation, but of a research phase, or a kind of early foray into the world and into the kind of techniques and politics of the musical genre. Techniques, because I think the interesting aspect was really to learn firsthand from a person who clearly says that she's paid for doing what she's doing, and therefore she uses her voice as a tool to make her living, which is fair enough. But what is beautiful about this conversation in the second part of your presentation, the one that you recorded, is that we learn a bit about the ways of making miracles, so to say. So the magic is in a way disenchanted in front of us, and it becomes a little bit like a science in its own right, which, in the words of